This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, June 1st at 12 o'clock on the East Coast. I can't believe it's June. Thank you for dialing in. I am pleased to, this is Kathy Neifeld with Agency One, and I am pleased to present as your speaker today, Joe Ross, who's the Vice President of Sales Productivity at American General. Joe is a phenomenal speaker, and today he is going to talk about the Secure Act, but he's going to talk about things in the Secure Act that I would be surprised if you've heard. I think that this is going to be an opportunity for us all to learn some nuances and discover some things that we're going to be able to share with our clients. And I'm not going to take up Joe's valuable time. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. I'm just going to remind everybody that if they have any questions, please type them into the chat box and we will be happy to address them at the end of the webinar. And Joe, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Kathy. And I'm really glad that you decided to host this presentation at noon your time, because being here in Denver, that makes it 10 o'clock in the morning here. If you'd have done it at 9 your time, I would be getting up awfully early on a Monday morning. So thank you for that. I will ask everyone who's watching today, this is not your father's Oldsmobile. This is not the same kind of webinar presentation you normally see. I am going to strongly encourage you to take out a piece of paper and a pen. You are going to see things today in this presentation that you should know, but you did not know. This title, as we filed it with our compliance department, is called Overview of the Secure Act. But the way I like to say it, I don't call it an overview. I call it the ironies of the Secure Act. I talk about it as the contradictions and conundrums hidden inside the Secure Act. Things that people are cheering about for being really great, but when you think about it, you realize, what were they thinking when they wrote that? I live in the world where credibility is really important. It's important to me as a presenter. It's important to you as an advisor. And so I try to give you what I like to call credibility builders. What's the perfect credibility builder? Well, one of the things I like to say is the perfect credibility builder is when I know something you didn't think I would know, that you should have known, but didn't. When I know something you didn't think I would know, that you should have known, but didn't. And this presentation is littered with those kinds of credibility builders where you are going to get the opportunity to know things that other people in this industry simply don't know, that is going to give you a credibility builder that puts you ahead of the pack. So again, get a piece of paper and a pen handy. You're going to be taking some notes, because I can assure you, you're going to see things today and hear things today that you have not heard or seen before. Now, the backbone of this presentation is what's in the Secure Act. So it doesn't do me any good to just make a copy of my presentation and send it to you, because a lot of the things I talk about are not in the presentation deck. The presentation talks about what's in the Secure Act. I'm going to talk to you about what's crazy about it. So that's why you need the pen and paper. Just sending you my PowerPoint deck wouldn't help you much. So let's dive in and see what we can learn. As most of you know, the acronym, government loves these acronyms. I love how they toil over what to call a tax act so that it can come up with a good acronym. So the Secure Act is Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act. How did that play out? It was actually passed by the House back in July of last year, and it had plenty of time to be implemented. And boy, wouldn't that have been nice if the Senate would have just gone ahead and stamped that with approval and let her rip. But no, they didn't. 2 senators out of the whole group were holding out for a couple of revisions that they wanted that they ultimately never got. But because these 2 senators dragged their feet and dragged their feet and dragged their feet, lo and behold, a tax provision, a fairly significant tax provision that had a January 1, 2020 effective date, went into effect officially right before the end of the year, giving practitioners literally no time to gear up for this, which was astonishing to all of us that they did this. Made it very difficult for a lot of the planners. But I got to tell you, one of the reasons that I was reading an article about this, one of the reasons that the Secure Act was passed is because they attached it to the 2020 appropriations bill. And it made it through largely because it was deemed to be revenue neutral. revenue neutral. What does that mean? It means every tax act like this costs money. There's expenses. There's money being spent for the provisions in the Secure Act. And to achieve revenue neutrality, the senators and congressmen want to see revenue provisions inside that bill that offset the expense provisions. And if you can create a bill that's revenue neutral, in other words, it doesn't really cost the government anything because the revenue coming in from your bill offsets the costs of your bill, it's much more likely to go through. And it's that net revenue neutrality that got the Secure Act passed in the wee hours of 2019. But here's the deal. We're going to talk more about this in our conversation today. The cost of the Secure Act is estimated at $16.2 billion with a B, $16.2 billion. 97% of the revenue that's going to offset those expenses in the Secure Act come from one place and one place only. What is it? That one place is the elimination of the stretch IRA. 97% of the revenue is coming from reducing the ability to stretch over your lifetime to a stretch of only 10 years. That's where 90% of the revenue is coming from to cover the cost of the Secure Act. I got news for you on this one. Now, I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. If I remember right, if I inherit an IRA, I will pay tax on every dollar in that IRA. Everybody with me on that? That's correct. Now, under the old rules, I could stretch. And if you apply the old rules, I'm not going to get into the details of how the RMD factors work for IRA beneficiaries that are different than the RMD factors for IRA owners. But the RMDs under the old rules were designed to empty out an IRA at age 87. So if you lived a normal life expectancy to your mid-80s, every dollar will come out of that IRA and it will all be taxed. But under that old program, the vast majority of the tax happened later in life. Under the new rule, with the 10 years, the vast majority of the tax revenue happens early on in the first 10 years. But here's the point. The Secure Act, by eliminating lifetime stretch and replacing it with a 10-year limit, did not generate tax revenue. All it did was accelerate tax revenue. This is a boondoggle that has been pulled over the wool of the eyes of most Americans. I did the math myself. I took $1 million IRA and I did two different scenarios. In scenario one, I stretched it over the beneficiary's entire life expectancy. In the other scenario, I used the new 10-year rule. In both cases, I calculated the distributions and calculated the tax on those distributions. Guess what? The tax revenue under the old rules on a present value basis is almost identical to the tax revenue on the new rules. And it proves to me, and I can show you the evidence, it proves to all of us that eliminating the stretch did not generate one bit of present value tax revenue. All it did was accelerate tax revenue. Yet that's what's covering 97% of the cost of this. It's untrue, and it's amazing that is what gave it its revenue neutrality. But just be aware that 97% of the revenue being generated to cover the cost of the Secure Act comes from that one place. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about how IRAs are affected. There's a couple of things going on here, and this is the beginning of the conundrums, things that don't make sense. So in 401k plans, if you are a working employee and participating in your employer's 401k plan, and you're over 70 and a half years old, you don't have to start taking RMDs because you're still working and you can continue contributing. Under the 401k rules, you can continue contributing for as long as you continue to work. And you don't have to stop contributing and start taking required distributions until after you stop working. Now, the congressmen and senators were looking at IRAs and thinking, you know what, IRAs don't make sense. They're not lined up with these 401ks because with IRAs, you're not allowed to make any contributions after age 70 and a half, even if you're still working. We got to fix that. So that's what they did. They said, let's repeal the maximum age for IRA contributions. Let's allow people to contribute past age 70 and a half. In fact, let's let them go indefinitely. Remember, the only way you can make a contribution to an IRA is if you have earned income, right? you can only contribute earned income to an IRA, which says that if you are making contributions to an IRA, you're what? That's right, you're still working. And that parallels you with the 401k plan. If you're still working and you're generating earned income, you can continue contributing to your IRA. That's great news. Thank you, senators and congressmen, for that. But they blew it. They missed a huge problem, and that's right here. They increased the RMD age from age 70 and a half to age 72. Now, that has a bunch of baggage with it. And as it relates to the first bullet you see on the screen, the first piece of baggage that it has is that the congressmen and senators completely overlooked the idea that if you are still working and you are allowed to continue contributing to your IRA, that you shouldn't have to start taking required minimum distributions until when? Well, if you want to be like a 401k, after you start working, after you stop producing earned income and stop contributing to your IRA, then you should start having to take RMDs. But guess what? They missed it. They completely blew it. It doesn't matter how old you are or how hard you're working or how much work revenue you're generating. You are required under your IRA to start taking RMDs at age 72. So let's think about this mathematically for a minute. Now, I just happen to know, because I do a lot of work with IRAs, that when you take your first RMD in your early 70s, even under the new rules, your first RMD is between 3.5% and 4% of your IRA account balance. Let's use real easy math. Let's just say that it's 4% of your account balance. That means if you have a $100,000 IRA at age 72, you've got to take out $8,000. What is the maximum you can contribute to an IRA if you're in your 70s and you have the opportunity to take advantage of the maximum contribution and your catch-up provision? This year, 2020, that limit is $7,000 a year. Because the IRS will allow you to make contributions indefinitely, but also requires you to make RMD distributions, let's double the size of that IRA. Let's just say you had a $4,000 RMD on a $100,000 IRA. You got a $8,000 RMD on a $200,000 IRA. So if that's your $200,000 IRA and you're still working and still contributing, guess what you get to do? You get to put $7,000 in at the beginning of the year and take $8,000 out at the end of the year. You put your contribution and you took it right back out. What good did it do you? That's the amazing thing. They totally missed this, and most people have no idea that it even exists. The other part of the RMD at age 72 that's interesting is that statistically, only 18% of people at RMD age are only taking their RMDs. 82% of the people that are RMD age or older are taking distributions larger than their RMD. Why? Because they need to live on it. They don't have a lot of money. That's the way the world works. So just be realizing that when they increased the RMD age to age 72, it did nothing to benefit the rank and file employees that are tirelessly trying to put away enough money for retirement. The only people that provision helped is wealthy people that don't need to live on their IRA and are content to leave their money there because they can live off their non-qualified assets. And if you had a $1 million IRA and you didn't have to take your age 70 RMD and you didn't have to take your age 71 RMD, and you've got a $40,000 RMD a year, you just saved $80,000 of RMDs, which now you didn't have to pay taxes on and sits in your IRA and continues to grow. It's clearly a benefit for the rich. It does absolutely nothing for those who are not. So a double-edged sword on that RMD increase to age 72. Everybody's cheering for it, but it's not helping the rank and file employees that the act was supposed to be helping in the first place. And then comes the third one, reducing the stretch to 10 years, which again does not generate tax revenue, but it does accelerate tax revenue, giving you the illusion that there's more money available when in fact there's not. Now, what do we all think? If you need tax revenue and you're not really generating any additional tax revenue, that means you don't have the tax revenue you needed, which means now we have an expensive tax act that really doesn't have any increased revenue to support it on a net present value basis. And if you did that, what does that mean? That means we just added $16 billion of expense without corresponding revenue. And eventually that chicken's going to come home to roost. And where do you think that might send tax rates in the future? Think about that one. So that's a big concern. Now, I'm going to talk to you about something that on this slide, there are 3 things going on right now. 2 of them are on this slide. There's a third one that's not on this slide. There are 3 things going on right now that are likely to increase the taxes that IRA beneficiaries are going to pay. I'm going to tell you what those 3 things are. The first one that's not on the screen is that there has been proposed an update to the uniform distribution table. Now, if you don't know what the uniform distribution table is, it's the IRS table of factors. They pull the factors from that table to determine your RMDs. They are updating the uniform distribution table to reflect longer life expectancies. So they're adjusting the factors so that when you calculate RMDs using this new table, your RMDs will actually go down to reflect longer life expectancies. Now, that could be something worth cheering about, but what happens? Follow the dominoes on this one. So you're one of those wealthy 18% of the population that's over 70 years old, and you don't need to live on your IRA. So you're leaving the money in there as long as you can. And now your RMDs just went down. That's really great news for you because you get to leave more money in your IRA, which means when you die, there will be more money in your IRA. And that's good news for your beneficiaries because they'll inherit a bigger IRA. What's the bad news in that? Isn't it obvious? When a beneficiary inherits a bigger IRA, what are they going to pay more of? More taxes on that IRA. So the first of the 3 things is the new uniform distribution table of factors, which is expected to pass soon, which is going to reduce RMDs. Second one is this middle bullet. RMDs increased to age 72. Again, who does that affect? It affects high income earners. It allows them to leave more money in their IRA, so that their IRA will grow to a higher balance when they die and pass it on to their beneficiaries. The good news is, again, the beneficiaries will inherit a larger IRA, which the bad news then means the beneficiaries will pay more tax on their IRA inheritance. Now, your clients are not going to get hit with one of those 2, the new uniform distribution table or the increased RMD age. They're going to get hit with both of those. So going forward, all of these IRAs are going to get bigger at the time your client passes them on as a legacy. And then the third one is this IRA stretch being reduced to 10 years. Now, understand how these rules work. Under the old rules for stretching an IRA, you had to take RMDs every single year all the way out through your life expectancy at age 87. Under the new rules, all the money has to be out in 10 years, but the IRS doesn't care how you do it. They don't care if you take it all out in the first year. They don't care if you take out a little bit every year. They don't care if you wait till the 10th year and take it all out then. They don't care as long as all the money is out in 10 years and it gets fully taxed. As long as you do that, you're fine. Well, do you know what people are going to do with that? Beneficiaries are going to inherit these IRAs, and under the wise counsel of their tax advisors, and this counsel is good counsel, take advantage of the tax deferral as long as you want. If you're in your 50s when you inherited that IRA because your parents were in their 80s, you're not retired yet. Sit on that inherited IRA, let it grow tax deferred for 10 full years, and then we'll pay the taxes later. Well, imagine that. Imagine you're 50 years old, you inherited a $1 million IRA. 10 years later, what's that IRA going to be worth? Well, if you invested it, it's going to be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.6 to $1.8 million, possibly more depending on your returns. $1.6 to $1.8 million. And in the 10th year, you're going to take it all out of your IRA. That's going to put $1.6 million on your 1040 in 1 year. What's that going to do to your tax rate? What's that going to do to your taxes? You're going to get absolutely hammered by those taxes. But that's what people are going to do. So when you combine all 3 of these things, the new RMD table of factors, the uniform distribution table, lowering RMDs to reflect longer life expectancy. Number 2, you increase the RMD age to age 72 so those IRAs can grow even bigger. And then 3, you let the money sit in that inherited IRA for 10 years where it can grow to an enormous amount and get taxed in the highest marginal tax rate available. All 3 of those things are going to increase the amount of tax IRA beneficiaries are going to pay on their IRAs. What can you do about that? Well, we have all kinds of solutions for IRA wealth transfer. I'm going to skim the treetops on a couple that I'm hoping you've been thinking about. 1, a strategy I call tax offset. Figure out these new increased IRA balances. Figure out what this IRA is going to be worth after the children sit on it for 10 years and grow it. And now they're going to get hammered with a boatload of tax. In my example, if you were going to pay tax on $1.6 million and you were going to pay 40% taxes on that, you're going to pay taxes of over $6 million. Maybe that client should have a $6 million life insurance policy so that when their parents die, they'll get $6 million that they can use to pay the taxes on that IRA when they liquidate it at the end of 10 years. A second strategy is something we call tax elimination. Very simple strategy. How do you eliminate all these egregious taxes that hit an IRA after you die? I know, let's give the IRA to somebody that doesn't pay any taxes. Change the beneficiary of your IRA from your kids to your charity. How much tax will the charity pay when they inherit that IRA? Oh yeah, zero. Now your kids are feeling like, wait a minute, what happened to that $1 million IRA I was going to inherit? How do you solve the problem? Buy a $1 million life insurance policy on mom and dad. Let the kids inherit $1 million of income tax-free life insurance death benefits instead of inheriting $1 million of fully taxable IRA proceeds. And now what happened? Their legacy just went from 1 million to 2 million because they gave $1 million to the charity income tax-free, $1 million to their kids income tax-free. They just doubled the value of their legacy to their beneficiaries. What a great strategy. The third one I talk about is a spousal Roth conversion. Most spouses don't die in the same day. So if you think, for example, dad's going to die first, and let's just say they have an IRA that looks like it's going to be worth, give or take, $1 million when dad dies, here's what we want to do. Dad's going to die. Mom's going to do a spousal rollover of the IRA, and then mom's going to do a Roth conversion. Oh, wait a minute. But if mom does a Roth conversion, she's going to have to pay tax on that entire Roth conversion. Wow, on $1 million, that could be $400,000 of taxes. That's pretty stiff. Yeah, you know how we solve that problem? We buy a $400,000 life insurance policy on dad today while he's still young and healthy. And when dad dies, mom inherits that $1 million IRA, does the Roth conversion, and uses the income tax-free life insurance death benefits to pay the tax on the conversion. Now what does mom have? Mom has a Roth IRA. It grows tax-free. She can access it tax-free if she wants to, but doesn't have to. She has no RMDs. And when it goes to her children, it goes to them income tax-free. And under the new Secure Act rules, those kids could inherit a $1 million Roth IRA. They could let it sit for 10 full years, take it out at the end of the 10th year for $1.6 million. And how much tax would they pay? Zero. These are the stories that we can be talking about. If you first alert your clients to the concerns of what's happening inside the Secure Act, you can draw that into solutions that you can offer that nobody else is talking about. Are we having fun yet? I hope you're taking some good notes. Let's keep going. We got a lot more to cover. So the old rules, we had stretch IRAs. What was a stretch IRA? We all know you can stretch it out over your entire life expectancy. Doing that allows you to preserve tax deferral for as long as possible. It allows you to keep your taxes low. Unfortunately, those days are now gone. We don't get to do that anymore. So where does that leave us? Well, let's think about that bottom one right there, the 10-year stretch capability. There's some baggage that goes along with that. And this is stuff you also should know that most practitioners don't know. So let's talk about who can still stretch. What it says is IRA beneficiaries, and you probably all heard this, you can stretch, but you cannot stretch beyond 10 years, but there are exceptions to the rule. I want to walk you through this because there's some incredible information in here that nobody is talking about. So the IRS has now created 3 different categories of IRA beneficiaries. Let's take a look at what those are. The first category is what they call designated beneficiaries. We've had designated beneficiaries for as long as we've had IRAs. When you put somebody on the IRA form as the beneficiary, that is their designated beneficiary. Designated beneficiaries are human beings. So notice children, parents, siblings, relatives, friends. But conspicuous by its absence, notice what's missing from this designated beneficiaries list. Notice that spouse is not on the designated beneficiaries list. It used to be, but it's moved, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Okay, what's the implications? If you are a designated beneficiary, then you must abide by the new 10-year distribution rule. All the money has to be out. If you're any of these human beings and inherit an IRA, you must take all of the money out within 10 years and pay tax on all of it. That's your designated beneficiaries. What's the next category that they created? The next category they call eligible designated beneficiaries. And this is where the exceptions begin. Eligible designated beneficiaries get to stretch over their life expectancy, which is cool, but there are exceptions. Let's make sure we understand what these exceptions look like by picking some of these off one at a time. First of all, surviving spouse. Well, for surviving spouse, does it even matter that you can stay on as, because a surviving spouse, remember, has two options. They can stay on as a beneficiary, or they can do a spousal rollover to their own account. Why would they stay on as a beneficiary to get this life expectancy when this form of life expectancy as a beneficiary is going to empty the account at age 87? When instead that surviving spouse could do a rollover to their own IRA, and they could stretch over their life expectancy going beyond age 115. They have much better stretch privileges, much better life expectancy calculations if they do a spousal rollover. So why do you even include the surviving spouse as an eligible designated beneficiary? Why didn't you just put them over here and let them do what they're going to do? Because that's what they're going to do anyway. They're going to do a rollover to their own account. They're going to stretch over the rest of their life under much better stretch provisions. It doesn't even make sense that they're under this category. Let's take a look at the next two. I'll lump them together. Disabled individually and chronically ill individuals. When you think about somebody who's chronically ill, are you thinking about somebody in their 30s, 40s, 50s? Probably not. We think about chronically ill people being in their 70s and 80s. How many chronically ill people in their 70s and 80s are going to be beneficiaries of somebody dying with an IRA in their 80s? Well, unless they're a brother or sister and that person who died with the IRA has no spouse, no children, no lineage, no descendants, it's probably not going to a brother or sister. So these generally are really geared towards a brother or a sister more than anybody else. And that almost never happens in IRAs. Look at the next one. You can stretch over your entire life expectancy if your age is within 10 years of the decedent's age. Well, nice big concession the IRS made there. If I'm 83 years old when I die and my wife is 82, well, she's going to be able to stretch over her life expectancy, which is basically the same as my life expectancy. Remember, the tables are not gender specific. They're the same for males and females. So if my wife is close to the same age that I am, she won't be able to stretch any longer than I would have been able to stretch if I hadn't died prematurely. So this actually didn't provide any benefit at all. And the last one that is really amazing is that they said, you know what? If you're a child and inherit an IRA and you're under the age of majority, you can stretch over your entire life expectancy. And that's what everybody heard. This was packaged and marketed extremely well, and that's what we all heard. What didn't we hear? First of all, we didn't hear that provision only stipulates children. It doesn't say children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It doesn't say lineal descendants of the decedent. It says children. Think about that one. How many clients do you have who die in their mid-80s that have a child under the age of majority? Now, I'm not saying this never happens, but it's rare, very rare. And if it did happen, if you are in your 80s and you have a child in their teens, the odds are you have a young spouse. Are you really going to skip the financial support of your young spouse and give your IRA to your kid? Or are you going to give your IRA to your young spouse, who then will sit on that IRA until they die, at which time, of course, the child will be way over age of majority. So there's an example where it didn't work at all. But it gets even worse. It says children under age of majority, but in the rules it says you can stretch according to your life expectancy, but only until you reach age of majority, because once you reach age of majority, you have to fall into the 10-year rule. So let's take it one step further. You are that unusual character. You married a young spouse, you have a young child, you're 86 years old, you pass away, you give your IRA to your 14-year-old son. Your 14-year-old son can stretch using their life expectancy. but only until they turn 18. So they can enjoy life expectancy distributions for a whopping 4 years. 4 years later, they turn 18, they fall under the 10-year rule, and all the money has to be out by the time they're 28 years old. So even under this rule, even though it falls under the category of eligible designated beneficiaries, even though that stipulates that that child can have life expectancy stretching, they can't. They only get it until 28 years old, at which time the entire inherited IRA will be empty. You know how many people don't know that? And what about this third category? There's a third category that's actually a little bit more confusing. It's called non-eligible designated beneficiaries. What that's really focusing on is trusts and charities. Now, if you left an IRA to a trust as a beneficiary of your IRA, if any trust beneficiary is not a designated beneficiary or eligible designated beneficiary, then they don't get the 10-year rule. Trusts get the 5-year rule. How many people know that? Almost nobody. And then as a real peculiarity, what if you left a charity as a beneficiary for your IRA? Well, those rules get a little bit swirly because what's this RBD over here? That's your required beginning date. For anybody dying after 2020, that's going to be age 72, the date that you're required to begin your RMDs. If you left an IRA to a charity and you died before you started your RMDs on your required beginning date, then that charity is subject to the 5-year rule. If, on the other hand, you died after your required beginning date, after you started taking RMDs, well, then what does the charity get to do? The charity can use your remaining life expectancy instead of the 5-year rule. But wait a minute, you're 87 years old. Your life expectancy is only 7 years anyway. How much benefit was that? I'm surprised they even put it in there. Again, just a little bit confusing. But again, I want you to take a look at this and think about what this means. Hold on, I just got rid of my pointer. I got to bring it back again. Boom. All right. So what does this all mean? It means that people don't know things that are going on within their IRA that they need to deal with. But what can we do to help people with this new 10-year rule? This is really cool. If you have an IRA beneficiary that's now inheriting a large IRA, which is typically the case, they inherit a large IRA, they don't know what to do with it. You know what they'd love to do? They'd love to do a Roth conversion. They got to take all the money out of that inherited IRA and they got to pay tax on it anyway. Wouldn't it be great if they could drop it into a Roth IRA where they'd never pay tax again and have no RMDs for the rest of their life? Wouldn't that be awesome? You know what the problem is? IRA beneficiaries are not allowed to do Roth conversions. Only IRA owners can do that. Beneficiaries cannot. So what can the beneficiary do instead? Well, instead of sitting on the money for 10 years and taking all the money out in the 10th year, take out an equal amount every year. Let's just say you inherited $1 million IRA. That's going to have some earnings inside of it. So let's say you distribute, say, $110,000 a year equally for 10 years to empty that IRA out over a 10-year period of time. Take $110,000 out, pay taxes on it. You'll be left with maybe $75,000. Drop that $75,000 into a max-funded life insurance policy for the next 10 years. And what do you end up with? Think about this. The money came out of the IRA and paid tax on it, just like a Roth conversion. The money now goes into the life insurance policy on an after-tax basis, just like a Roth conversion. The money now grows tax deferred, just like a Roth conversion. There are no RMDs, just like a Roth conversion. And when you die owning that life insurance policy, the death benefit goes to your beneficiaries, income tax free, just like a Roth conversion. So what we have the ability to do is counsel our clients on how to take an inherited IRA that they don't need to spend right now and essentially get the equivalent value of a Roth conversion that they can't do. And nobody's going to talk to them about this because nobody understands it. Get this information around it, get your arms around this information, and you'll be able to start talking to your clients about ideas they've never seen before. Let's finish by talking about a couple of the other benefits. I hope you still have ink in your pen and paper on your table so you can keep writing notes, and I hope you're having fun with this. There was a provision in there that says that if you have a childbirth or adoption, you can take a penalty-free withdrawal from your IRA. Well, this is curious for a couple of reasons, because the Secure Act was designed to bolster retirement security. Giving people privileges to take money out prior to retirement is the direct polar opposite of that intent, which in and of itself is somewhat interesting. It's also interesting to note, and most people will never know this one, if you're going to do this and take the penalty-free withdrawals, you cannot take the money out for childbirth or adoption until after the childbirth or adoption is complete. Now, if anybody knows anybody that's done an adoption, you incur significant expenses prior to that adoption. And you might be thinking, I can just take a withdrawal from my IRA to cover that. Guess what? It takes a long time to get an adoption to go through, and you can't take that money out of the account until after the adoption is complete. That's a stickler. And what does it get you anyway? The maximum you can withdraw is $5,000. And all it does is eliminate the tax penalty, which on a $5,000 distribution, what's 10% tax penalty on $5,000? It's only $500 that you saved. You still got to pay the taxes on the $5,000. If you're in a 25% tax bracket, you're going to lose nearly $2,000 of that IRA just ordinary income taxes. Ooh, you got to save $500 in penalty tax. So again, this one just is amazing to me because it really didn't accomplish much of anything. This one is, to me, one of the craziest elements of the Secure Act, that you can make student loan repayments from your 529 plan. And you can pay up to $10,000 a year towards student loans from your 529. Everybody read that and said, wow, this is great. I can start paying down those student loans with my 529 money, right? Wait a minute, think about this. I have 2 daughters in college. I funded a 529 from the time they were knee-high to a grasshopper. We have been using that 529 account money to pay their college tuition and related expenses. Why on earth would I borrow money when I still have money in my 529 that is specifically there to pay expenses for their college education? If I'm like most people, and I assume that I probably am, I'm not going to start student loans until after I've exhausted all the money in my 529 plan, which means that this provision literally makes no sense for 99.9% of the people walking the continent of America, because they will have spent their entire 529 before they took student loans. And now you got the student loans, what would you rather do? Just pay off the student loan or make a contribution to your 529 and then take the money right back out and pay your student loan? It doesn't do you any good. But there it is. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody thinks this is a great provision. 99.9% of the people cannot take advantage of this. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's what I mean by ironies and contradictions and conundrums built in to the Secure Act. But let's talk about what it did for small business owners, because this is interesting too. Small business owners can now create these 401k multiple employer pension plans. And I think to myself, my goodness, we had a plan for small employers. It's been around for a long time. It's called what's that again? Oh yeah, simple plan. Why is it called a simple plan? Because it's simple. Do you know how simple a multiple employer plan 401k is? It's not simple at all. And you know what? One of the #1 complaints, I mean, I know there's small businesses that might be a small manufacturing plant, might have 80 employees. And if you did, you might have people that participate in your 401k plan. But the vast majority of American small businesses are Main Street mom and pop retail small businesses. They're clothing stores. They're maybe a pharmacy. They're a shoe store. They're a five and dime. These kinds of stores are the kinds of small businesses that would want to be able to do something like this. But you know what they determine, what they find out, what they realize in their experience is that the vast majority of their employees are part-time employees. They don't make enough money to contribute even if they wanted to. And if anybody on this call has spent any significant time trying to convince small businesses to implement a retirement plan like a 401k plan for their small business, first of all, a 401k plan has to be audited every year. And I got a very good friend of mine who is a pension TPA for small businesses. And he tells me that it typically costs around $10,000 a year to audit a 401k plan. Oh, what small business employer is going to want to do that? And the other thing that you find over and over again as you pitch 401k type plans to small employers is that their rank and file people don't end up contributing anyway. So they implement the plan, nobody contributes, they contribute as the employer, and now they got a top heavy problem and they got to take money back out. This is going on all the time. So did this really help? Gosh, I don't know. And they got so excited about it, they even gave tax credits for these small businesses to set these up. And you know what's even worse? is if you are a small business and you have one of these 401k multiple employer plans and you are now a plan sponsor. Now, the benefit of the multiple 401k plan is you get to spread that $10,000 audit cost across all of the other businesses. So you can dramatically reduce the cost of that annual audit. But when you do this and you become a plan sponsor, now you fall under the regulations of the Secure Act, which means you have to start tracking the hours so that every single employee that works at least 500 hours for 3 consecutive years has to be allowed to participate in your plan. Even if they're only putting in $4 a month, they have to be allowed to participate in your plan. And now you have that extra plan admin that goes with it. Again, why not do a simple plan? Or how about this? If you're a small business owner and you want to sock away money for your retirement and you don't want to deal with all the headaches and overhead of all of this stuff, I got an idea. Why don't you do a Section 162 bonus? Buy a life insurance policy on yourself, use business payroll contributions under Section 162 into your own personally owned life insurance policy and build your retirement nest egg that way. Now you have a life insurance policy that has no RMDs, no taxes on any distributions you take out of it, and a tax-free death benefit for your family. Why wouldn't you do that instead? No onerous IRS paperwork, no annual audits, all of that stuff goes away. What a great solution. That's something you might want to be talking about. They also talked about the big heyday that everybody's talking about. Oh, looky here. We can put annuities inside of 401k plans. Great. Think about that. See, the congressmen and the senators did a really lousy job of defining what they mean by this. They didn't write in there that it only includes fixed annuities, or that it only includes indexed annuities, or that it only includes variable annuities, or that it includes all three, or that it includes immediate annuities. It just says annuities. Now imagine, first of all, think, where does an employee who's participating in the 401k plan get their investment advice? They don't get investment advice. So now they're looking at their 401k plan, they're a brand new employee, they're just newly enrolled, and they're looking at their investment options, which typically most employees only look at those investment options the year they join their employer, they set it, and they forget it. And they're looking at their investment options, and they're seeing this money market mutual fund, and this blended mutual fund, and this high cap equity fund. They're looking at all these different funds. Oh, I see. There's this S&P 500 index fund. I guess that's just going to track the S&P. Oh, and there's this nice target date fund. I understand how that works. Those are easy. And then they scroll down and they say, oh, here's an option. Here's an option. Oh, it's a variable annuity that has 57 funds inside of it and a lifetime income benefit. I have no idea what that is. I have no idea how that works, and I have no one who can explain it to me. How many people are going to choose that option? You see, what the IRS really was trying to do here, I believe, what the senators and congressmen wanted to do here is give people secure lifetime income. How do you do that? You do it with immediate annuities. That's how you do that. That's where a lifetime of guaranteed income comes from. So why don't you take your 401k? Because what you're trying to do is take a defined contribution plan and turn it into a defined benefit plan. We can do that. We've been able to do that all along. You retire, you take your 401k, you roll it over into an IRA of your own, and then you use a portion of the funds in your IRA to buy an immediate annuity that guarantees you a lifetime income stream for yourself and your spouse for as long as either one of you shall live. It's just like doing a pension. This is the kind of IRA that people are looking for, but they're not going to invest in this immediate annuity inside of their 401k plan. They're too young to do that. This is something they want to do when they retire and guarantee themselves a lifetime of tax or a lifetime of cash flow guaranteed no matter how long they live. And you do that with immediate annuities. That provision of the Secure Act that allows you to buy annuities inside of your 401k plan is probably going nowhere. This is the solution your clients are looking for. Talk to them about this solution and help them understand how you can help them achieve and protect their lifetime of financial security. So there you go. Not just an overview of the Secure Act, but the conundrums and contradictions, the ironies of the Secure Act, the stuff you should know to elevate your credibility in the eyes of your clients and your peers. The reason people come to you for financial advice is because you know more. I hope you took a lot of great notes. I hope you learned a lot of good stuff that you can take away and put into practice immediately. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kathy and the folks at Agency One with my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to share these ideas with you today. And I hope you can put them to great work. Kathy, back to you.
Joe, thank you so much. That was fabulous. You really talk quickly. Oh my goodness. We do have, do you need a glass of water? We
Yes.
have, yes, I'm sure that you do. We had two questions that came in, and I encourage anybody else, if you've got any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. The first question is, on your charitable strategy, can it be a donor advised fund such as with Schwab or Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund?
That's a good question. It's a little bit technical. To the best of my knowledge, but you're going to have to ask somebody that knows more than I do to fact check this one. To the best of my knowledge, a donor advised fund is not able to inherit an IRA and not pay tax on it. I believe it has to be a true 501c3 charity to receive the money in order to have that IRA inheritance be treated tax-free. But again, fact check me on that one to be sure. That's just my best understanding of it. I apologize if I got that incorrect.
Okay, thank you. And then we had another question, and this was from back in the beginning of the presentation. The question was, how did you come up with a $6 million tax on 1.6 million? What did I miss? I think there might be some, yeah.
I was doing the math in my head because I'm on a webinar and I don't have time to look away and use a lot of my tools and things. But if I get out my calculator here and I take $1,600,000 and I multiply that by a 40% tax rate, which if you're going to put $1.6 million on your 1040, you're going to be in at least a 40% tax rate. That turns out to $640,000 of taxes on a $1.6 million IRA. It's just $1.6 million times 40% tax rate. So if you inherit a $1 million IRA, you let it sit and cook for 10 years under the new Secure Act rules, it grows to be worth $1.6 million. You take it all out in the 10th year, you drop it on your 1040, you pay 40% tax on it. You're going to pay $640,000 worth of tax on that $1.6 million IRA at 40%. So it's just simple, straightforward math. I hope that helps.
I think that probably that should have answered the question. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't see anything else coming through. If there are no more questions, I am going to remind everybody that this was recorded, and the presentation and the recording will be on the Agency One website if you'd like to listen to it again. If you've got any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to myself, Ed Stark, Gonzalo Garcia, or any of your team at Agency One. We will be sure to direct your questions to Joe and engage in a dialogue. Joe, I cannot thank you enough. This was so informative, and I am sure that everybody, or I hope that everybody, was writing diligently and came away with a couple different ideas as to what they can implement with their clients. I'd like to remind everybody that the next Agency One webinar is going to be Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and we are going to focus on fluidless underwriting with the smooth sailing program from Pacific Life. We're focusing on that program because it is unique in that you can place insurance on individuals between the ages of 50 to age 69, up to $1 million of insurance, fluidless underwriting if they have had an exam in the past 18 months. So we're going to do a deep dive into that product, and we thought that the folks would be interested in that, given the fact that it's difficult to get exams right now and people are looking to put some insurance in force. So with that, I am going to again thank Joe Ross and our friends at American General for this phenomenal presentation. I hope everybody has a terrific Monday, and I look forward to everyone dialing in again on Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Joe, thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you, Kathy. Everyone have a fantastic week.
Take care.